Hello. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. Thank you for joining us. And today's topic is very interesting. It's about AI and immigration, how to use it. So, Michael is already with us. I'll introduce everybody and then we can start the session. So, as we all know, now AI is a necessity of our life. And whether you are an immigration attorney, a consultant, a tech enthusiast, or someone simply curious about how artificial intelligence is reshaping the immigration landscape, you are exactly at the right place. So, immigration has always been a field defined by complexity, evolving regulations, mountains of paperwork, tight deadlines, and high stakes for the people involved. And now, artificial intelligence is opening up new possibilities to navigate that complexity faster, smarter, and more accurately, maybe. But with new possibilities come new questions. Where do we start? What tools actually work? What are the risks? And how do we use AI responsibly in field where a single error can change everything? Or I must say, a single error can change someone's life. So today, Michael is going to help us to understand and teach us and share some insights about how we can navigate AI in immigration and what are the intersections of the technologies and law and how we should be able to use it in a very conscious and a proper manner. Thank you, Michael. All yours.
Thank you. Thank you. Can you help let me join on the computer too, so that way I can bring up my presentation? Good morning. Thank you, Swati. Good morning or afternoon to everybody. Oh yeah, it's afternoon pretty much for everybody. Okay, let's get out of here. So yeah, let's talk about how AI is affecting our lives, right? So it affects our daily lives. We know that. Everybody is using it from anything from doing exercise routines to knowing what to cook in the kitchen to answering complex questions that have no business being answered by a general AI source. So I'm going to share my screen. Do you mind giving me the opportunity to share my screen there, Swati? And
Yeah.
we'll talk about how AI is affecting us in immigration. This is it's huge, right? Because we know that most people are using AI even in the law, right? And there's been the advent of people coming out with new AI technologies and so on, trying to make it a little more robust in terms of the opportunities inside of the law. But most areas of law consist of drafting, right? Most areas of law don't have a ton of extra paperwork. They're not consistent with what we do in immigration law. So let's look at how immigration law is affected and what we can do to make sure that we're using proper technology and understand how that technology works. So it's can you see my screen, Swati?
Yes. Mhm.
Okay, perfect. So the new standard, how artificial intelligence is shaping the immigration practice for lawyers, but also the way they practice for their clients, because that's very important. Remember, it is called the practice of law, just like the practice of medicine. And we all know the word practice does not mean refined. We're all working on making it better. And the reason this is the case is the human body in medical terminology, it doesn't change, but people are unique. So we know where the organs are supposed to be. We know how the veins and arteries and so on are supposed to work, but it different people are unique. And so unique situations. In the law, we have something that is ever changing. So the body, in this case, would be the body of work or the body of law. And it is always morphing, it is always changing. And so we have to make sure that we're updating, we're keeping up to date with those changes and making sure that we're protecting ourselves from using bad sources. Just so you guys know, there have been over 1,300 documented examples of hallucinated citations being submitted to judges in courts on legal filings. 1,300. Okay. To the point now where New York just came out and is making this whole new regulation. California is making a whole new regulation about the use of AI. And most of you may have already heard, if you're up to date on this, you may have already heard that a federal court came out just about a week and a half ago and said use of open source AI. So that's something that you can get even if you pay for it, right? Even if you pay an enterprise fee for like ChatGPT, or you have your Google Suite in Gemini and you're using Gemini, it doesn't matter. Those are open source AIs. They're not yours. So the courts now can get access to the data from those. So if you've asked any questions or done anything or obtained any legal advice in there, it's not privileged. It's not confidential. They can get it. So it's very important to remember this, because they can't get at the attorney's computer, but they can get to the open source. And we're going to talk a little bit about what's the difference between having a computer, which is a tool, and an AI, which is a tool. Why can they get to one and not the other? So let's move into it. Let's see. Okay. So we know the shift has already happened. 2023 changed the world. Okay. 2020 changed the world for different reasons, right? We were all stuck at home and everybody was scared they were going to die. But then 2023 changed the world in a completely different way, right? It changed the world technologically. When we saw OpenAI launch ChatGPT for people to be able to start chatting with, it changed everything. There has been AI before this for many years. AI infrastructure and architecture has existed for many years prior to 2023, but they were mostly behind a veil of cost and access. So IBM has been flirting with and using ChatGPT, well, not ChatGPT, an AI infrastructure for a long time, but it was internal. So if you wanted to get access to that, you had to buy one of their servers. You had to pay millions of dollars a year to have access to the reasoning and the logic. But ChatGPT, OpenAI, changed the world with the advent of open access to this, like no cost to begin with, if you remember. And you can still get access to free, but no cost. So it changed everything. The old reality was for immigration law, heavy paper file cases, manual review processes, hours spent drafting, organizing, cross-referencing documents by hand. Delays were built into the system. Okay. Now, the new reality is AI-assisted drafting, instant document analysis, real-time compliance checks, no longer emerging trends, right? There are the operational standards reshaping immigration law today. And the question is no longer whether the adoption of AI is going to happen, but how it will happen safely and effectively, okay? So let's move forward. Everyone is using it. Attorneys, you may not know this. You probably do if you've thought about it at all. Your attorney is using AI. Paralegals are using AI, from anything from translating documents to sourcing to asking questions, right? And other legal staff. And then applicants. Many of the people on here are people who desire to apply or have already applied for a visa of some type, whether you're already on an H-1B, whether you've already applied for an EB and you now want to move to an O-1 or an EB-1, right? Everybody is using it. The problem is whether or not the use of that AI is safe and effective, okay? So the hidden risk, that's what we're going to talk about, safety and effectiveness. What actually happens, right? What's actually happening? Every time a legal professional or applicant puts case-sensitive information into a consumer AI tool, that data enters a system with no guarantee of confidentiality or protection. That even includes, so for a while, we'd have people push back on this because we've been saying this ever since the beginning, right? And people push back and say, no, I have a paid subscription. It says on the bottom in little bitty letters, your information will not be used to train the model. First of all, that was empirically untrue, right? Your data was definitely, maybe there was masking that was happening, but the way your data was asking questions and working with the system was definitely helping refine responses and searches. So your data was being used, maybe not your name, right? Or your date of birth if you put in a birth certificate, but your data was being used. Now we know that your data is not confidential for another reason, because even if the system weren't using your data, the courts now have access to your data. So they can get that. And that's because it's an open source. So names, country of origin, visa history, personal narratives, they're all partially used to train the AI models and stored on third-party servers, which, by the way, led Texas this last year to passing their own AI Act, which said you can use AI for the practice of law. However, the AI must have certain requirements built in, including having a server that is in the US and encrypted. So this is where they drew the line of, yes, you can use AI, but the AI has to be any data that's consumed or stored by the AI must be on a US server, and it must be encrypted. They haven't said encrypted at transit, they've said encrypted at rest, right? So that helps. So the exposure risk for a lot of clients is client PPI, personal identifiable information. Your name, your social, your date of birth, right? Your country of origin. Remember, a lot of people are trying to steal data. Why? Because stealing a person's identity is a huge multi-billion-dollar industry around the world. Case strategies are visible to platform operators. There's no attorney-client privilege anymore, and the data potentially retained, shared, or breached. So what can we do about it? So the federal reality check. Now we know, no guarantee of confidentiality. State bar guidance is starting to accelerate. Multiple states have issued formal ethics opinions requiring attorneys to understand. First of all, they're telling attorneys, in order to be an informed attorney and to be providing the best service, you need to understand AI tools. Why would they say that? They would say that because it is the leap forward. Used to, it would take 4 hours to put together an adjustment of status. Now, it shouldn't take more than an hour. Why? Because you have tools that help you, whether they're legal tech tools that help you, put data into forms, stack documents, review, create memorandums, write motions, drafts, opinions, letters. It doesn't matter. Everything has begun to accelerate. So the state bars are saying you have to understand them. You have to ensure that you are competent, but you also have to protect client confidentiality. Okay, so you guys may not remember this, and maybe you do. For years, there was this huge question in the law of whether or not you should use a cloud server. Why? Because a cloud server is not stored on an internal server in your office. Therefore, there is a theoretical possibility for someone to get access to your cloud server. Now, there's still a theoretical possibility for somebody to hack into your internal server unless it's air gapped. And there's even workarounds for that, like direct access in your office, right? So the question about the cloud kind of dissipated. Why? Because there was a lot of encryption that happened. There were keys that were put in place. So it made it a lot more protected, and that kind of went away. But now we're seeing the advent of the argument of AI. So ignorance of the tools and data practices is not a defense. This is what the state bars are saying. Malpractice exposure is real. For those of you who practice law, or those of you who have an attorney, using a consumer AI that could expose client data produces inaccurate legal content or responses. This is important. 1,300 documented examples, documented situations where hallucinated citations have been submitted to judges. And just a few weeks ago, one of those cases actually went up on appeal. It won based on the hallucinated case. No one did their job to go look it up. So then the judge goes ahead and approves. He or she gave an order approving this case in favor of the person that submitted a motion that had a hallucinated case. And he or she based their opinion on that case that was hallucinated. That's how far it's gotten. So hallucinated case citations, professional negligence, the liability landscape is obviously evolving, and firms are not shielded simply by not having formal AI policy. Oh, we didn't know. Ignorance in the law in the US is generally not an excuse. I'm driving 50 miles an hour. I haven't seen a speed limit sign, but the road is 35. If a cop stops me, I'm going to get a ticket. And I may get a ticket for being exceptionally over the speed limit, where it gets like 3 marks on my card and they could tow my vehicle. Why? Well, officer, I just pulled out into the road a mile ago and I didn't see a mile marker. I didn't see a speed limit marker. Ignorance is no excuse. That will not get you off from getting that ticket. And the same is true here. So the bottom line is no guaranteed confidentiality. It's not a legal disclaimer to overlook. It's a professional liability waiting to happen. And for you, this means your information, your data, your storage, the methodology by which the attorney is doing their work, the way their result comes out, all of those things are in jeopardy when using open source AI. So everybody's using it. And why does it matter? Okay, especially in immigration. First of all, we have, like the medical field, we have uniquely sensitive data, right? A lot of times, like if you're doing hardship waivers or you're doing letters or you're saying why the government should have a favorable discretion in your favor, right? You could put in medical information, which means now, unless there's PPI being scrubbed, your medical data is out there, right? And there's a whole area of law called HIPAA that talks about medical data exposure and the protection, criminal history, immigration violations. Let's say this. Let's say if you put your criminal history up into OpenAI, into ChatGPT or Gemini or something like that, and then the court can get that information, you've now exposed that, I did this thing, but I got a dismissal of some kind. How is that going to affect me? Well, the fact that you wrote, I did this thing, automatically becomes part of a record that could be obtained by immigration. Family relationship, dependency status, financial records, and employment details. All of those things are very important and should be protected. The stakes are higher here many times because a data breach or AI generated error in a contract dispute is costly. In immigration law, it can be catastrophic. In a contract, you could have some loss of money. In a immigration proceeding, you could end up with deportation, family separation, denial of asylum, permanent bars to reentry, all kinds of things that can end up happening that devastate families and devastate individuals. The sensitivity of immigration case data demands a higher standard, right? Can't use these virtually open sourced available AIs. It's just not a healthy objective here. And we can talk about how the AI is built and so on and so forth. There's probably some people on here that know it better than I do. I've been studying it for a while now. And so we can talk about that as well. But just so you know, as a second part of this, USCIS is using AI now. So immigration, Department of Homeland Security, they've been using AI through forms of identifying people on the street, facial recognition. They've been using AI and reasoning for a long time. But now it's finally gotten into the immigration side. What does this mean? Petition submitted. An AI-assisted review happens. Then the officer looks at it. The officer is highly dependent on that AI review, right? So there's good and there's bad here. The pro, we may see that processing of applications happens faster, right? So if you don't have to have an agent that looks through your 40-page EB1A brief, which by the way, a 40-page EB1A brief is probably unnecessary. I find that a 12-page or a 10-page is usually sufficient unless you're just so over the top that it takes that long just to tell your history. But you no longer have an officer having to do that. The AI reviews it, gives the officer a summary and says, yeah, this looks approvable, right? So the use of AI tools are designed to flag inconsistencies, which is what, when Swati mentioned accuracy, that's key because she said accuracy, maybe. That's what she said in the intro, right? Why would she say maybe? Well, because AIs have to be trained, right? So then the AI, when it's being trained, could come out with inconsistent or inaccurate information. We've seen this. We've talked about it on a couple of the webinars. We get RFEs for things that were already submitted, right? We get applications rejected for being on the wrong form when the form is the correct form. So this was happening due to the fact that the AI was still being trained, right? Which means that now we're seeing less and less and less of that, which means the AI is getting refined throughout the feedback cycle, right? So the training cycle. Now that those training cycles have turned into a multitude of evolutions, right? Now we're seeing the AI get more refined and seeing less inaccurate responses from the AI. But where an officer, years ago, an officer could completely miss something in your application, could overlook it, could not recognize that it was there. The AI doesn't do that. So the AI will provide much more accurate, much more detailed reviews of your applications. So then the officer can look at the flags rather than having to look. So the officer can look at a tree rather than having to look at the forest, right? That's what's happening here. So across volumes of applications, surface potential fraud indicators at the speed of scale no human reviewer could match. If the petitions aren't optimized for this kind of scrutiny, then the structural disadvantage before a human officer ever sees them. In other words, there's a structural disadvantage that's happening for you or for your client if you're an attorney before USCIS ever looks at your petition, the officer, the human officer. Okay, so The rise of RFEs. We kind of started talking about this. So requesting evidence. And we talked about this in the last webinar, I think, Swat, I think it was the last one, where we talked about we've seen a rise in RFE and noise. Why? Well, there's been a change in administration. That's on one hand. On the other hand, you have what I call pithy applications. So they are very broad in their scale. I've met 6 of the 10 criteria for EB1A, but there's no depth to them. All of the articles that you have written, all of the papers you have published, the book that you published, the patent, none of them have been cited. None of them are being used. The patent's not a real world patent, right? It's just something that's more of a placeholder for something, right? A unique idea. So now they're not just looking at the breadth, they're looking at the depth. Well, AI can look at that a lot more accurately than any human can, right? Once the AI has been trained, now the AI is able to look into details, but we're talking about in a matter of seconds. So the AI is able to review things way more quickly and with much more consistency and accuracy than a human reviewer. So common AI flags, inconsistent dates, which almost every application that I've put into my AI, because I have a proprietary closed loop, it's not open source, so it's protected AI, it will flag things like that. Like, oh, on this form, it was put that they entered as a tourist, whereas on this form, it said they entered as an H-1B, right? So flagging those inconsistencies in order to make sure that everything is running in line one with the other. Vague or formulaic statements, personal statements. This is the definition of what you'll get from a Chat GPT or Gemini. It's not specific. It'll be specific to you or have your name on it. It'll say some of your details, but it's not going to be looking at the internal portions of how immigration operates. So the USCIS handbook, which my AI has, right? The USCIS handbook. So it looks into the mind of the USCIS officer, into their training and how they train the AI to say, this is how this needs to say what it needs to say in order for when the AI does its first review, not to flag it with there being some like vague or fluffery. By the way, a 40-page EB1A brief usually is full of fluff. A lot of attorneys used to believe that more is better. More is not better. Being correct and being specific and being to the point, giving the data necessary, that's better, not more. Whereas a lot of people will just say the same thing multiple times in different ways in different areas of it, and the AI is just going to automatically get those out and say, that's unnecessary data. We already have those points. So missing supporting evidence patterns, contradictions across submitting documents, and unusual petition structures versus the norm. These are all things that the AI automatically is looking for in order to be able to see whether or not your application has any red flags. So the new review reality, human versus AI. Traditional human review, variable attention and consistency. We know that. People get tired. People need breaks. It's the end of the day. It's the end of the week. They've done 100 of these over this month, and they're just trying to grind through. Subjective interpretations of narratives. This was a huge one. I would tell people all the time, USCIS officers and border officers have a lot of unilateral power. In other words, they have the ability to make a decision that may fall outside of what the law would strictly say because they have a lot of unilateral power. If that decision goes in your favor, you're happy. If that decision goes against you, now you're mad and you want to appeal. Well, this with an AI review, it gets rid of a lot of that bias, the human portion of interpretation, all of that, which is actually a good thing, not a bad thing. Limited cross-pattern comparisons, seeing the one document and then 50 pages later, seeing another document that may have a conflict. Humans have a hard time recognizing that pattern in a setting, right? So they would have to review it multiple times in order to determine if there is some type of a pattern difference. Slower processing times, of course, we'll see them speed up and influenced by presentation and tone, right? We would go into sometimes, you could just tell, I would sit down with a person at USCIS to do an interview, and the officer, you could just tell, was either having a bad day or just didn't like my client, right? That's a problem because now the officer's personal feelings or personal experiences, maybe they don't like people that are from Guatemala. Maybe they don't like people who are from India. Maybe they don't like people from Arabia. All that stuff is biased, right? So it's less influence when you're using an AI and the tone and the presentation. So AI assisted review is more consistent, pattern driven, faster, stricter, and data centric rather than biased on what I think. Maybe I've had situations where attorneys have told me where an officer always denies, El Salvadorian citizens for whatever they're asking for. Why? Not because they don't qualify, but because an El Salvadorian raped his daughter. And so now he hates El Salvadorians, and so he takes that personal bias and he puts it directly at those groups of people. Now, is that a legitimate reason to be upset at people? 100%. Now, maybe not a whole population of people, but the point is that AI helps us get rid of some of that stuff. So there's a lot of positives. Okay. So the dangerous gap, there are three key players here. Applicants, unfocused, unguided, inconsistent many times. And they try to get focused or guided by using open source errant AIs. Okay. Over here, attorneys, many times unsecured, unprotected, and the privilege is at risk. Down here, USCIS, structured, pattern-driven AI scale. So this problem right here where you have the RFEs and the denials, noids, is when there's a misalignment. When we're not prepared, the attorney is not protecting data or using open source, right? And USCIS is now starting to use AI in order to be able to determine fallacies in applications, deficiencies. This opens the gap for much more of these RFEs, denials, noids, and data risk, right? So when applicants use unguided AI, attorneys use unsecured tools, and USCIS is starting to use the structured AI standard, it starts to widen that gap. So these applications that it was like, I think this is enough, those are going to be in peril now. So what AI is your legal team actually using? This is a huge question. And if they tell you we're using our own AI, then I would verify that that AI doesn't have access to the internet. Even if it's a proprietary wrapper, right? But it has access to the internet, that's considered open source, right? Which means that it's discoverable. It has to be a protected closed source AI, which makes it very similar to you using LexisNexis or Westlaw. Well, LexisNexis and Westlaw have access to data outside of their system, but they're used as tools inside of law firms. So we're trying to push it closer to how they work so that you don't have a risk of having your data exposed to government agencies. It's not as a hypothetical, but as a matter of professional responsibility, client safety, and competitive survival. The answer determines your firm's exposure, efficiency, and future. Very, very, very important. Now, open AI versus closed. What are the differences? Not all AI is created equal, okay? The distinction between open, consumer-grade AI and closed enterprise-grade AI is the most critical factor in determining whether your AI use is safe or a liability. So, open or consumer AI. Data may be used to train the model. No attorney-client privilege. General purpose, not made specifically for law. Harvey just came out. I think Claude came out a month ago, right? When we saw the stock market go boom, when they were like, we're getting into law, right? Harvey is a huge AI that does law, right? So they're more specific. They're trying to tailor things down. But when you have access to data that's outside of a knowledge base that has been curated and created, then you still don't know whether that AI is grabbing data or trying to satisfy a need. And so then it invents data in order for you to be happy, because part of its directive is answer the question. Give them an answer, make sure that they feel, so it keeps you coming back because I got an answer to my questions, right? So part of that directive and that system instruction put into the AIs automatically makes it want to give you an answer. And I don't know if you guys heard the new stuff from Claude that was talking about the soul document. So the soul document is literally a manifestation of a memory bank for an AI, even though it loses its memory on a new chat. It can still provide itself. It's writing it for itself. It's amazing, right? Close thing to a human you can get right now. It's amazing because it's writing itself a memory bank so that it can refresh its memory about what it knows. And I'm not talking about what it knows about you. I'm talking about what it knows as a general life experience, which is so weird to say when you're talking about AI, but it is happening. And the memory bank, the soul document is what they're calling it for Claude, is massive. It's like 50 pages. And what it does is it reminds people are good. We want to make sure people feel good, right? We saying stuff, leading people to say, want to commit suicide. That's bad, right? It's those kinds of things that are put in for itself in order to have that memory refreshed when it's opening up a new chat. So, no compliance with data structure, unknown data retention sharing policies, and of course, ChatGPT, Gemini, Copilot, most of these Copilot for consumers. I don't know how Copilot's structured when it's inside Microsoft and it's being used as an enterprise level. It may be closed. I don't think it is, but that's something you'd have to look into. So closed or enterprise AIs. Data stays within a secured private environment, okay? It's all siloed. Your case is siloed from other cases, right? So your data doesn't even leak into other cases. It's not all just placed. It's got actual silos inside the servers. Built for legal confidential requirements, okay? Confidentiality requirements. In other words, PPI is masked. It has a manually curated database that only answers questions that are relevant to that database. If you ask, for instance, my AI, hey, can you tell me what the story about David and Goliath from the Bible? It'll say, I'm sorry, I can't answer that. If you ask ChatGPT why the sky is blue, you're going to freak it out and it's going to start to hallucinate and it's going to start to invent answers for you. That's a very stark difference between those two. Immigration specific training for this one and compliance, auditable, transparent data handling. Where does it go? Where ours, for instance, Iowa, the server in Iowa, that's where ours is at. And it's all encrypted. It's encrypted at rest. And the data is on cloud. So there's just the API pull. APIs are protected as well. So no third-party data exposure. And of course, the example is Leo by Alcanza. I don't know any other ones that are working on the same way, right? Now, there are a lot outside of immigration. There are a lot of people starting to manually curate, right? And normally it costs, $250,000, $300,000 for a company to say, I want a small agent that's manually curated for my business, right? In my area. With us, it's not like that because of the way we've built it. The only real protection here is a closed AI environment. Closed AI environment means your client data never leaves your firm's secure perimeter. It is stored on an encrypted Google Cloud. It has to be, right? The AI operates with a private dedicated system, all siloed, no shared infrastructure, no model training on your inputs. In fact, we don't want training on your input. Why? Because your input's probably erroneous. I know what I trained the AI, and I don't want you interfering with the training that I gave it. So we eschew any additional training that people try to give. No third-party access, and your case stays your case. Why it's non-negotiable in immigration law? Of course, confidentiality and ethical obligations. Could be a matter of physical safety for clients. Think about a person VAWA, their spouse is their abuser, and they're trying to get a green card and try to be able to get out of that abusive situation, and the spouse finds out somehow. That could put that person at risk. Using OpenAI for asylum seekers, crime victims, politically sensitive cases is not simple. Is not simply a policy gap, it's a potential harm. So closed AI is the only responsible foundation for immigration-specific legal technology. So here's where I'm just going to introduce you to Leo so that you can see. This is not necessarily a pitch for you to use it. You are able to as an applicant, as a law firm. There are different opportunities for you to be able to use it. But it's the first one that we know of that specifically built closed loop, manually curated, encrypted AI for immigration law. So it's built from the ground up with security, precision, compliance, and practice demands, including, for instance, all the case law from the 1800s all the way to today, all the way from the Supreme Court down through the published opinions for local federal courts, which don't have much validity, but the BIA does and the AAO does. So secure by design, immigration native, and dual purpose, designed to serve both legal professionals and visa applicants in the same secure ecosystem. Why is it different? Enterprise grade security, built-in compliance, legal precision, workflow acceleration. Okay, I'm going to back this up for a second. How can I know that it's built-in compliance and legal precision? Because I've been in immigration for 15 years. I'm an attorney. I've done thousands of cases. I've studied the law. And that is what is used as the basic backbone of the brain, right? It's my brain, which partially helps me because what it does for me is it helps me not have to retain all that information on recall all the time. So then I can go to my AI and say, you know what, I believe this is true, but let me just verify. What's the statute? Right? What's the INA provision? How does USCIS look at this, that, or the other? And with the policy manuals and the whole law in there, and then everything that shows how immigration not only is supposed to answer questions, but their training, their internal training that should determine the outcomes as well. And of course, workflow acceleration, writing letters, briefs, drafts, actually filling forms with the AI, stacking cases with the AI. So all that makes it different. So for legal professionals, I don't know if we have any legal professionals on here. Intake acceleration, AI drafting, compliance and RFE checks, and final output for filing. So you draft faster, review smarter, and stay protected. So we review hundreds of cases, and we review them using Leo. Right now, there's always a human in the loop. Why? Because nothing is perfect. I'm not even perfect, right? That's what we were talking about. The AI is probably going to get a more accurate review than me, but I want to make sure that I'm looking at that review and verifying that I agree with that review before pushing it out to anyone else. So, Leo for applicants, this is where most of you come in. Empowering you safely. How many times have you tried to get a hold of your helper or your legal professional and it takes them days or weeks to get back to you, or you can't get a hold of them at all, or there's a vague email that comes out? This allows you to help know. So asking questions, get immigration specific questions answered immediately, 24/7, 365. It doesn't matter if you're in India, in the Arabic countries, in Europe, and your provisioners in the US. The AI will be able to answer you. Translate your documents, okay? And then certify, hey, I'm fluent in English in whatever language, and I'm certifying this is correct. Writing your personal statements and drafts. This is where a lot of, especially EBs and O1s, get stuck. They're like, who do I ask? Well, what are they going to write? Well, the person that you ask, you're going to be very careful about saying, I need you to write a 3-page, narrative about me. So helping them by creating that letter and being like, I wrote you a draft. Here, now you just got to go fix it, right? You do your changes that you want to do. And as long as everything is okay with you, then you'll sign off on it. It makes it a lot easier for them. Organizing, compiling, structure, supporting evidence, making sure you're not missing anything, making sure you're not including too much. I'm working right now on a legal memorandum referencing a criminal case that happened years ago, but that could be affecting the person today, right? And the problem is this person relying on a previous attorney's advice happened to fall through the cracks with bad administration. And then now, 10 years later, he could be winding up with a real problem on his hands because this has been missed all along. Having those kinds of things so that you're verifying that everything is being accurately described and you're not putting yourself in harm's way. So these are ways that can empower the applicants. For me, the biggest part is the writing, the letters, like my letters and so on, but also the other one, which is the verifying, asking questions. I just have a question. I just need an answer. Is an IEEE certificate sufficient to meet the criteria for membership? Is that enough to meet that criteria all by itself? The AI is going to tell you, no, well, that's a great certificate to have or a great membership to have. That's not sufficient to meet the membership criteria. Like you need more. And it gives you examples of here's some more that you could think about trying to go and do, right? So then that helps empower you to be able to move more quickly and feel comfortable and confident in your applications. So applicants who are better prepared, more consistent in their submissions, and less likely to produce AI-generated content that conflicts with attorney-prepared filings. Because you're using the same system, then you're creating things that don't sound like AI. They sound like you. That's one of the specific directives is use the tone of the writer, right? And that way, asking you, what kind of tone do you want to make this? How do you want it to sound? The more you use it, the more it'll get your tone and it'll start writing things in your voice. Leo closes the loop between what applicants do independently and what attorneys submit, creating a unified, coherent case. Less conflicting, more accurate, and more likely to be approved. So the outcome, better results, fewer risks, approved AI. So in my law firm, we use my system, all kinds of legal tech and our AI, and we have a 98% approval rate almost across the board, right? It doesn't matter if we're submitting a family adjustment, a naturalization, an EB, H1, it doesn't matter, right? H1's, of course, after they're approved for the lottery. But 60% time saved and zero data leak and lower RFEs. We almost never get RFEs. Now, that has changed a little bit in the landscape recently. And we put that due to the administration and the tightening of the gap between what you're providing and what they want to see. So we've seen that happen a little bit more. So the new standard has arrived. We have a new era, AI native, secure by design, and we call it the Leo standard. So the risk of getting it wrong, obviously we all know this. Client data exposure, deficient filings and denials, which for me is actually the most important. Normally it would be client data exposure, but for me it's about your life, right? And then ethics violations for practitioners and bar exposure. So the opportunities now, if you're an applicant or you're a firm moving over, getting it done, the growth equation, scale, quality, trust, differentiation, because you're moving faster and better. And what we've done at my law firm is we've actually decreased prices because we move so fast on applications. I don't have to charge as much because it takes us a lot less time, which means that our profits are higher. So you can use this if you want to check it out. You can use this. This will take you to Leo. So you can see the pricing. If you are an applicant, you would use the applicants. There are obviously guardrails on all of this. So right now, I'm going to go ahead and open it up to questions, so you can explore it. Try before you buy for a little bit. There's obviously stuff on there as well that caps it, limited, and it doesn't save your data because you don't have an account. So you can try it before you buy. You get a 5-day free trial. And then it's no commitment. You cancel at any time. But we'll go ahead and open it up to questions to see if anybody has any questions related to AI in general, AI use in immigration, AI in the law, and so
on. Yes. Thank you so much, Michael. It was an insightful and amazing session by you on AI and immigration. So we do have some questions. Rajiv texted me saying that, does immigration have access to these AI information? I believe he means to say USCIS have the access to these AI information.
So the new federal court ruling gives them access. So that means they would be able to say, I want access to so-and-so. So we've seen the rise in them asking for access to social media. Right now, they're requiring social media handles and so on and so forth. So we know that they're willing to delve deeper. And with them getting more AI, that means AIs can go scrub, right? So they don't have to send a person to do it. They just get access to be able to go scrub. So they'll have to have some identifying, features about the person, not facial, right? But digital features about the person in order to be able to determine what data. But yes, if you're using an open source, 100%. Open source is completely exposed. Even if you're paying for a subscription, that's still an open source, which means it has general access to the internet. So you're at risk there because they can access all that. The only way you get around that is by using a closed loop tool.
Interesting. Next question is, what questions can a participant ask in their petition building process to ensure the data added to the petition is helping the new AI-driven process effectively parse and analysis their profile? In other words, if the review process has changed, what practice from the petitioner's end, it means the client's end, would ensure effective review? Adding to it, there is a subsequent question, and how does a petition know when the AI is causing erroneous outcomes versus it has evidence for the result?
Okay. So generally what happens, so the questions you can ask a practitioner. So if you're talking about an attorney or a law firm, what AI are you using? How are you using it? Right? That's one. Two, having access to a closed loop where you can even review what they're doing. That's another way for you to say, I threw it up into my AI reviewer and it shows that there's some conflicting data here. There's like erroneous information. Number three, for USCIS, your practitioner should be able to find these. So that's what we've seen. When we see things that are obviously not written by a human, that's the first red alert, right? The second one is, okay, this came back to me a week after filing it saying it was on the wrong forms. No human does it that fast, right? So there are things that give us the information we need that trigger in our mind saying this is an AI, right? And so that's how we know. I will say that we've seen a lot less of that since January to the end of March. Now where we're at, we've seen it go down like significantly, where we had various like 4 or 5 applications in a single month returned for the wrong forms, when the forms were when they were correct, right? And so we've seen a decrease in this significantly. So immigration has always lagged behind. They never have the newest toys. They never have the newest tools. They don't even have an API set up to do direct filing. So places like DocketWise and e-immigration that are like filing directly into the government system, they're actually hacking the government system, which when I talked to the USCIA techs, they said, we're going to have a problem with that here very soon. So we've been very careful not to do that. And I've had attorneys who are like, you don't put the information directly into the system. And I was like, no, because I don't want to get sideways with the federal government by hacking their system, right? So you have to be careful, but we do know that immigration is starting to get a little more advanced. And the reason is because the focus of this administration on tightening, but also on getting rid of fraud. That's what's happening. And the only way you can accurately get rid and efficiently get rid of fraud is by having something that is reviewing at a much deeper level. And then if you do it at a deeper level, you'd have to add a bunch more humans. Well, how do you not have to add a bunch more humans? You add an AI that 24/7, 365 without a coffee break or a smoke break can keep working, right? And keep reviewing so that the humans are just taking the tail end and saying, here are the problems that we see. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, mostly. Yes, Michael. The next question is, will an application like DocketWise still be needed as well as Leo, or is Leo designed to replace need for DocketWise?
So Leo will replace the need. Now, so Leo is in fact, I'll just show you guys. So Leo is a reservoir of data, but it is not a process management software. So, and there's a difference there. So like right now, I'll just show you this. So Leo it looks very much like Gemini or looks a lot like, ChatGPT or whatever, darker colors. Up here, you change what kind of agent you're working with. I need the general, I need a case review, I need, motions, translations. So you have all your different chats over here. The system will retain created documents, right? So it will retain, like this is a hardship. This is an example hardship brief, right? So it'll retain this data. It'll retain anything that you've uploaded into it, like any files you've put into it. The difference is that in order to know where the file came from, right? Because this does eligibility all the way through tracking, but in order to retain the other documents and so on, you probably will still, and notes and stuff like that, you probably still want to have a system, but it works really well with our all kinds of legal tech. I actually talked to the owners of DocketWise about getting an API integration. And at this time, they're not open to that, which was interesting. But because their AI IQ, it only does like translating messages in their system between clients and attorneys and taking data from like passports, I-94s, and a couple other documents to put them into the forms. So ours does any document you put in, even if it's handwritten. And then there's a human in the loop. So you just analyze it afterwards to make sure the data is correct. So anyway, that's the way that it works. So in theory, yeah, you'll probably still want to keep a type of process management software. Just because you'll want to keep notes and documents and dates and stuff like that are maybe outside the system. But in theory, hopefully, eventually, ours are tied together. So they're two unique independent products, but they're API'd together. So eventually, that may not be the case. They may merge together. But some of the things that you do in AI you shouldn't do them in AI, right? Like a form filling, that should be a specific tool that AI calls up, right? So it's not AI filling the form. You get better accuracy when it's done through a workflow push to a PDF or some other type of form.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Michael. The next question is, as law firms and legal staff navigate a system where agencies like USCIS are increasingly using AI, which may reduce human bias, but also introduce risk like over-reliance and hyper-technical scrutiny, what should attorneys be doing in practice to mitigate these risks?
Well, they need to be using the proper AI as well. So that's the thing, is that I just saw on LinkedIn the other day, somebody was talking about AI responding to an RFE, and then the person using AI in order to respond to the AI's RFE, right? And so you're getting pinged between different AIs, right? So what you don't want to do is fall into a death loop where there's no human intervention. But the human intervention can be mitigated in terms of how much time it takes them, what they're charging you, right? By using AI. So having AI interpolate and extrapolate data in order to be able to determine, okay, how can I best respond to this in a way that whatever tool they're using accepts my response, understands my response, and can use my response in order to clear whatever the issue may be. That's the
Hmm.
best thing that they can do, is making sure they're using the proper tool in order to be able to respond properly to an RFE or to what I would say is my goal is not respond properly to RFE. I don't want an RFE. So I want to do the best at the beginning so that I never even get one, right? And that does still happen, but you have to have properly submitted applications where the person actually qualifies. That's a big deal too.
Yeah, so true. Okay. Do we have more questions rather than this? If you guys have questions, you can put up on the chat box. If not, I'm more than happy to share the recordings with you. It's always available in YouTube as well. You guys can scan it from the screen to purchase or to use a trial period of Leo. And yeah, and try it out. Elizabeth is asking again a subsequent question. Are the clients of attorneys using Leo disclosing use?
Yes, 100%. So Leo is built into our actual software as well. So yes, it's not a selling point, but it is also not a negative. I saw that second question, follow-up question. It's not like, oh yeah, this is the selling point. I think that day is coming very soon, but it's not there yet, right? People don't feel one way or the other. Um, People who are industry professionals like it, right? So they'll want to see it, they want to test it, they want to use it, right? As far, and I'm talking about applicants, people who are petitioners, the clients who want to apply for something but are industry professionals in technology. They're like, yeah, I want to see this, I want to try it out and see, and then they're really impressed. Every attorney that we offer this to, their response is always, I've tried a bunch of different AIs out, none of them work like this. And I was like, well, that's because we built it differently, right? Ours is built on a graphical network with the neural network, built the three layers of reasoning up into the generative layer. So it's just built differently, which gives a more accurate result more quickly. But like in my law firm, when I tell clients, most of my clients are people from, I would say 80% of my client, 20% are from India or or Asia, right? South Asia. The other 80% are from Central and South America, right? So they many times don't understand enough about AI to be here nor there. Now, when they know that we're not charging them to translate their birth certificates and stuff like that, and they bring it in, and our paralegal takes it and puts it into the system, and within 30 seconds they have the translation ready to be signed, they're like, that's crazy, how did you do that? People charge me $25 to do that, right? To do that, and it takes them a couple of days, and it's because our AI, and they're like, wow, I need this, right? So yes, some people are impressed, but once they see what it does, when just mentioning it and disclosing, hey, we use AI in our system, it's neither positive nor negative, right? And so with industry professionals, it's more positive, right? They want to see it, and once they've used it, then once again, it's kind of the same thing.
Right. Okay. All right, Michael, thank you so much for the amazing session. I don't see any subsequent questions or new questions by anybody, and we are also at time, so I'm gonna close uh the webinar. So thank you so much, Michael. And you guys can like see again all the videos that we been discussing in the Open Atlas on a YouTube channel of the Open Atlas itself. So thank you so much. I'll see you once again next time with a new topic. If you have any kind of topics that should be discussed by me and Michael, you can put up the request over an email and we'll come up with those topics and discuss in length. For the time being, just take care. Thank you so much. Have a happy weekend.
Thank you.